This is the verse that we have chosen for Mordecai, and it's a good verse for him, and it tells us why. For Mordecai the Jew, important. You had the Babylonians, you have the Persians, and you got the Jews all intermingled over there at this particular time. For Mordecai the Jew was next unto the king. He was second in power. He is the prime minister of the land, of the kingdom. So for Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. We've got it good here. Let's do well. And so again, you have the people back in Jerusalem who were taken there. Remember Zerubbabel? And then we went with Ezra. And then last week we were there with Nehemiah. And they were building and battling. These folks are comfortable. These Jews that we meet here, they're businessmen. They're well established. They own properties. They're wealthy men and women. And they have a lot of power. In fact, one of the reasons they're going to get into trouble here is because they are so rich. We meet a man named Haman. And Haman is, when we meet him, the prime minister of the land. He is probably ancestral home. He's probably related to the Amalekites. His name, the Agatite, the name for the Amalekite kings was the Agag. And so we think that he may be related to those Amalekite kings. And as so, the kings of the Amalekites, remember, were worshipped. So it's possible that helps. First of all, the Amalekites and the Jews hate each other. Hate each other. Remember, the Jews have been going out and were annihilated. They've always been warring against the Amalekites. Always, the Amalekites would come in, murder them off. The Jews would go back in, kill off the Amalekites. And they kept this war going for generations. No love here between these two. Now, this Amalekite all of a sudden is made prime minister. And the king says, when you see him, you're going to treat him like me and you're going to bow down. But to Haman, being a ruler, this is a religious thing. It's like, I'm a god, you have to bow to me. Mordecai has a problem. Mordecai, we're going to see Mordecai the Jew. In fact, let's take a look at him right here. He refuses to bow to anybody except for God. He won't bow to the king himself. So he's not going to bow to the number 2 guy. If you don't bow to number 1, you're not going to bow to number 2. Just not going to happen. But number 2 has been waiting a long time because his family history is that people worship us. Not going to happen. You are not a king and you're not a god. How can you be a god when you're not even really a king? You're only the number 2 guy. Gods aren't number 2. Gods are at the top. This ticks him off. And he gets so much more angry, this Haman gets so much more angry than he really should have. I mean, it's just one man refusing to bow down. You figure, okay, hey, I'm the number 2 guy in the kingdom. All right. Not a problem. Everybody else bows down to me, except for these Jews. Just stay out of the Jewish neighborhoods and you'll be okay. Right? But Haman has a real problem with this. Mordecai has a cousin, a little girl cousin. Well, she's grown up now. And she's the queen. So you got Mordecai the Jew, who is sort of the councilman for the Jews. He is the one, his legal duties require him to be around the palace so he can represent. He's kind of like a councilman who represents the Jewish community. And they have, the kingdom, remember, is vast, and they have people from every country in the Middle East. So they've got these men who are appointed to represent each of those with the king, an ambassador, if you would. So it's a very, very notable position he has. He's one of the king's advisors, one of the councilmen, one of the rulers in this kingdom. So he's got an important job too. And he may be thinking, listen, I'm important. I'm not asking anybody to bow down to me, and I wouldn't expect anybody to. So I'm not going to bow down to you either. But that really ticked Haman off a lot. And I think it had to do more with that religious idea of his. And I think Mordecai's resentment maybe had been because he recognized in Haman was trying to develop he was trying to really usurp God much more than the king. He wasn't wanting to be bowed down to like the king was. He was more wanting, not bowing, but more of a worship thing. And Haman, I think, or rather Mordecai, I think, recognized that pretty quick and wasn't going to give him any of it. Just wasn't going to happen. Well, here's the problem. Mordecai is right in saying, I refuse to bow down. But he does anger somebody with a lot of power. Remember, he's second in command to the king. He can't do anything, however, without the king's permission. So as you go through Esther, you find out that Mordecai comes up with a plan not just to get rid of, Haman doesn't come up with a plan just to get rid of Mordecai, but he uses it to an advantage to kill all the Jews, because Jews don't like to bow down to people. They get special exemption. Okay, Jews don't have to worship the king. You know, we saw that in with Daniel and the rest. They got special exemption from that. And here's somebody now who was said, okay, when you see him bow down to him, he goes to a Jew. A Jew, of course, is going to refuse. It angers him. So we have to get rid of Jews because they won't worship us. So Haman comes up with a plan. He gets the king, because remember, he doesn't have the authority to pass a law. Only the king can pass a law. And the problem, remember, the laws of the Medes and the Persians do not change, do not alter, and do not get erased. Because the Persian king himself thinks he is a god, and a god can't make a mistake. So once he passes a law, it stays a law, and even he can't remove it. So Haman comes to the king, and he says to the king, how would you like $10 billion? King says, I'd like $10 billion. I know where we can get it. I just need you to pass this bill, and I will pay you for signing your name. If you will pass this law for me, oh, don't worry, there's a lot of paperwork in there. Just sign right here. I can get you $10 billion. Okay. And the king signs it. Has no idea at this point what he's signing, really. So the king's happy. Mordecai promises him $10 billion. Well, when am I going to get it? Well, Mordecai calls in a council of religious people of his own. And Mordecai decides, okay, I got the king to say okay. And the king doesn't know what he's okayed yet. But Mordecai's excited because he did get the king to okay the murder of all the Jews. All right? So Mordecai's all excited. I keep saying Mordecai. Haman's all excited because he got permission to kill off all the Jews. He's all excited. In Eastern culture, there are lucky and unlucky days. And if you're going to murder off all the Jews, you got to do it on a lucky day. You don't want to try to murder them and have something go wrong on an unlucky day. So in the Orient, in the East, it's very, very common. You'll hear a lot, because we deal a lot with the Chinese anymore. And you hear a lot about lucky numbers and lucky days. And it's very, very common in Eastern culture, these lucky days. So Mordecai gets some dice. In the Persians, it's referred to as pur, P-U-R, pur. To the Jews, they're called lots. To you and me, we call them dice. So he's got these lucky dice, and he's going to use it. He has to decide, what month do I want to kill? Now here we are at the first month number 1. Let's suppose January from our calendar. It's not, it's more like March in their calendar, but I don't want to confuse you, so let's go with our own, what we're used to. Let's suppose you got the king to say on the 1st of January, okay, you can kill them. I signed your law. It is in effect. You can do what you want. Now you got your lucky dice to decide when you get to kill them. So he's got all of his counselors, probably some holy guy ready to roll the dice from his own background, his own religious group, and they roll the dice. And the dice come up to say the last day of December. Wait. My lucky day is a whole year away. Here I am, January 1st. The dice come up December 31st. Kind of shows God blowing on those dice, doesn't it? He gets himself a whole year to solve this. The Jews established the feast day of Purim, Purim, based on, it's the feast of lots, the feast of dice. Everybody goes to Vegas and rolls them bones, right? That's where that comes in at. It comes in from Esther, okay? And when he got there and he rolled the lot, he rolled the dice, he rolled the purr to get a lucky day. And on the rolling of the dice, you could see God's hand, because he moved it back to the very last month, the very last day of the month, indicating that God's watching this. He doesn't need all that time, but he wanted to show his people that he was in control of all things, even in the lucky roll of a dice, which ended up... Now, Naaman can't pick up the dice and retry, because they already claimed this to be lucky. And he's already got some religious guy, some lucky dice roller, throwing the bones for him. And so he's stuck with this date now. So all of a sudden, Mordecai, because he comes and he tells Mordecai what he's going to do. He's been torturing him. He tells him that he got permission to kill him. And now he even tells him what day he's going to die. And nothing you can do about it. King signed it. And not only are you dying, but the king signed that I get to kill all y'all. All the Jews are dead. If you're not in fact, I get to kill your Jews who went home to all the Jews in the kingdom, which is every Jew you saw on that map. Not just the Jews in the palace, not just the Jews in Persia, not just the Jews in Babylon, but Jews anywhere. Any Jew who is found anywhere in the kingdom will be killed December 31st. Lucky day. Mordecai goes to his cousin and says to his cousin, "Cuz, we got some problem." Now listen, God's let you be queen now for 5 years. So I wonder why God has you queen. And why have you been queen now for 5 years? Why didn't this happen when she first became queen? Because God's given the king time to fall in love with her, time to appreciate her. You know, when you first meet somebody, there ain't a whole lot there. But after 5 years, you're not going to give her up. So now when she comes and Naaman comes in and says, "Oh, I got permission to kill everybody, all the Jews," and she stands up and says, "Sweetheart, that's me." What? Yeah, you signed that decree that he gets to murder me in December. Thank you, honey. By the way, I made you something special for dinner. Yeah, you know he ain't going to eat that one tonight, right? So you could see all of a sudden, now that's going to concern him. And all of a sudden, Mordecai and Esther now, along with God, have 1 year to overthrow this thing. And of course, they do it. You know the story. Esther calls Haman in. He sort of flirts with her, and I'm not sure that she doesn't flirt with him. He gets the idea, though, that maybe she's begging for her life, and he gets a little too comfortable with her. The king walks in, and she says, he's grabbing on me. Now, here's the thing. If you touch another man, particularly the king, if I was to kiss the king's wife, it's saying to everybody, including the king, I'm taking your place. If I take your wife, I'm taking your kingdom. So when he's making himself friendly with the queen, what is that saying to the king? I'm stealing your kingdom from you. Not just your queen. And she knew this because she's been there 5 years now. She knows a lot of stuff. She sort of traps this guy, but she traps him only because he is willing to be trapped. He is an evil man, and she just uses his evilness against him. Now, God had other plans. That was her plan, to trap this man Haman. Good plan. It's going to work. But God had another plan. Mordecai didn't even know it was part of the plan. Neither did Esther. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago maybe, Mordecai was out. He couldn't sleep one night, so he's out roaming the halls of the palace. And while he's roaming the halls of the palace, he hears a couple of people talking. And he's interested in who's talking, and it's late at night. So he begins to go back to the door to where they were talking, and he listens in. And he hears men talking about killing the king. They set up a plan to assassinate the king. So Mordecai goes to the palace guards, the bodyguard of the king, and says, there are men in such and such place, and such and such, and they're making plans to murder the king. So sure enough, the police go there, they get the people, they have the evidence, everything is there. The plans, the whole show. And whatever isn't there, they torture the guys and get the rest of it. These are not necessarily nice people. So Mordecai doesn't even realize he did something for the king, only because that's what good people do. Good people talk when they hear something bad. I heard that they're going to murder him. I'm not going to keep that a secret. So I go and I tell the authorities. Those men are arrested. It's written in the book of the Kings. Mordecai the Jew told us about this plot to murder you. 2 years goes by. Nobody told the king. It's written down in the law book. And the king can find out about it anytime. Well, one night, it just so happens that God gives the king insomnia 2 years later. One of the things the kings had were these historical journals that told them about events that happened in their kingdom. So when he couldn't sleep one night, he's up reading the journal. And he reads how Mordecai saved his life, and that he hasn't done anything yet to even say thank you to this man, let alone honor him with some way. He hasn't even said, I'd like to thank you for saving my life. Nothing. He didn't even know about it yet. So all of a sudden he calls his people together and he says, what have we done for Mordecai the Jew who saved my life? This man who, as we could see, cared enough to adopt his own cousin. Probably his parents are dead. Probably her parents are dead. He's an older man, much older than her. He adopts her as his own daughter, raises his cousin like his own child, helps her, grooms her, cares for her, helps her to become the queen of the land. Very nice guy. He uncovered this assassination against the king, tells about it. 2 years later, the king can't sleep. He's already passed a law that says you get to kill all the Jews. He's not real careful about what goes on in his kingdom, is he? What have we done for Mordecai? King, you haven't done a thing for that man. You haven't even said thank you. You haven't sent him a postcard, nothing. So the next morning, he calls for Haman. And he says to Haman, what should I do? No, let me rephrase that. What would you do to honor the man that I wish to honor? Now, guess who Haman thinks he's talking about? Who would the king want to honor more than the second in command? Who could possibly be worthy of more honor than the man you've already honored by making him prime minister? He made him prime minister, so Haman assumes the king is talking about himself. So he says, King, you know what I'd do if I were you? I would get your best horse. You know that white one that you lead out whenever you're victorious? When you go off and you conquer another country? You know that one when you come back into town, everybody says, oh, we won another victory? I would put the man on that horse. And I would put him in your best kingly apparel. Not just the ones you wear around the palace, but the stuff you put in for the big official banquets. Your tuxedo. That, I'd put that on him. And not that little crown that you wear when you're around the office, but that great big one you wear for state dinners. I'd put that big crown with all those clothes on your best horse, and then I would get your most important man, and I'd have that man lead the horse around town all over the palace, and I'd have that man announce, this is the man that the king wishes to honor. Bow before him. This is the man the king wishes to honor. And the king said, I like that idea. Let's do that. Mordecai says, okay, I'll go out, get fitted for the outfit. No. I want you to do it not for Haman. I don't want you to do it for you. I want you to do it for Mordecai the Jew. What? Now remember, these two hate each other. Mordecai doesn't want to bow down to Haman, and Haman is not going to bow down to Mordecai and say, because remember, the Jews and the Amalekites, no love there. And now he's supposed to look at this man and say, behold the man that the king wishes to honor. And I'm going to pull his horse while he sits up there and looks down at me. King has it all planned out. Haman hates this. He really can't wait for his lucky day to come. His lucky day, though, unfortunately, isn't until December. The queen came up with a plan. He's already been humiliated by Mordecai, so when he comes in the door, the queen could see that he feels bad about being humiliated, and she invites him to sit down. And when he sits down, she's thinking, or he's thinking, because all men are pigs, he's thinking a little bit more than what she's saying. He was the Weinstein of his day, apparently. And so he gets a little too comfortable with her. And as he's making himself comfortable, the king walks in. She jumps up and says, he grabbed me. The king calls his bodyguards in. Oh, you know what? There's this great big gallows outside. Because remember, he was going to murder off all the Jews, but he was going to start with Mordecai. And so he had this great big gallows, like 70 feet high. He wanted everybody to see that man swinging at the top of this gallows. So the king says, take him out and hang him on that gallows. Wow. Now, all that has nothing to do with what we have written up here, so let's take a quick look at this. First of all, he uncovered assassination from the king. Good thing. And he told somebody about it. Better thing. He cared enough to adopt his cousin, Esther, who would become queen. God's working in this man's life even when he doesn't notice it. Oh, why did I get saddled with this girl? What am I going to do taking care of a baby girl? But I've got to. I'm a good guy, and good guys do good things, right? And then, but I can't bow down to that guy. He's a jerk. And I wouldn't bow down to anybody but God anyway. And being a Jew, it's okay in the palace for us not to bow down to anybody but to God. And everybody knows that. The Babylonians, the Persians, everybody knows that's the rule for the Jews. When Haman dies, he takes Haman's place and becomes the prime minister. Now, as far as bad, we don't have any recorded. How come? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, either he never did anything wrong, but you know, the way he hated on Haman, you have to think there was some animosity. He wasn't a perfect man, because a perfect man wouldn't have hated. But maybe this wasn't hate. Maybe this was not letting the sun go down upon your wrath type stuff. Maybe this was more of be angry but sin not. Maybe. Because after all, the guy was wanting to exterminate you. They uncovered not only the plot to murder the king, but then they show the king, this man got you to sign the murder of all the Jews throughout the kingdom. And the king says, wow, I feel bad about that. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, nothing I can do. Unfortunately, when I write a law, it stays a law. Can't undo it. The laws of the Medes and the Persians, they change not. It's written by God. God makes no mistakes. But he doesn't admit that this is a mistake. Maybe it was not the right thing to do at that particular moment, he's thinking to himself. So Mordecai, who's now the prime minister, says, well, here, I know you can't undo that law, but can you write another law? Oh yeah, I can write another law. All right, here's what I want you to say then. And so Mordecai writes a law that says, on this particular day, the Jews can kill anybody who wants to kill them. If you want to kill me, the king says I can kill you first. Now, are you going to tell me you want to kill me? Because I get it first. King's going to let me have it first. So although the king can't undo what he did, he passes a law making it perfectly legal for all the Jews to arm themselves on that particular day and kill anybody who means to do them harm. And they will be completely innocent in doing it. So at least now the Jews have the right to protect themselves. And if I find out you want to kill me, I can kill you first. Gives me a huge advantage. Huge advantage. So in so doing, and then with Haman out of the picture and Mordecai becoming the new prime minister, the Jews sort of get a much better label. But they were so powerful. Remember that $10 billion I told you about? Mordecai estimated that would be the value of the property that the Jews in and around that area, that's how much value. And if he killed them all off, he would own all of their property. So he was willing to cut the king in for a percentage. And the king's percentage would have been $10 billion. That was the king's motivation for doing it. So I'm telling you, with that kind of money, these Jews were not poor people. They were not slaves. These were the people who didn't go home. But you would say and think, wait, you know what? If I made a way for you to go back to Jerusalem and you didn't go, if I was God, would I be upset with you? Because God says, okay, I took you prisoner for 70 years. Now I'm letting you go home. And everybody says, we don't care. We're not going home. Enough of them do, though, so that the population of the Jews is shrunken. And so Haman figures it's easier now to kill them off because there's not as many of them. But there's still enough of them that there's a lot of wealth that they own. So much wealth that he was able to tempt the king, who owns everything, just with the sheer amount of monies that would be gained by taking the property of these dead Jews. We have no bad recorded of him, but we do have these couple of lessons, I suppose we might say. What could we learn from him? Our opportunities, I think, now this is important. I want you to get this idea. Our opportunities are more important than the ones we wish we had. We all think to ourselves, if I could do this and if God would let me do that. Esther's idea to trap Haman was a good idea. But was it better than God's idea to let Mordecai overhear the plot? Which of those two really saved? Mordecai could have thought to himself, oh, if only I was queen. Got a problem, Mordecai, with that one. The opportunities you don't have but wish you had aren't as important as the opportunities that God really gave you. Each and every one of us every day is given by God an opportunity to do something for him. Whether we take advantage of that or not, that's up to us. We say to ourselves, oh, if God made me this, then I would do that. But he didn't make you that. But what he did one night was to give Mordecai insomnia, so he had to roam the palace. Did he see any advantage? What could he do for God with that? How can I serve you with insomnia? Well, I walk up and down the palace, walk up and down, walk up and down. How am I serving God? He saved an entire nation of people with insomnia. Now, he's thinking there's nothing big in me staying awake and getting nothing done. But there was. It was such a small thing. In fact, it was so small that when he went and told the guards, sure, they acted. But did the king ever even thank me for that? No. See, even the king doesn't care. God doesn't care. I got insomnia. What good am I doing? I'm not helping my people. I'm not helping the king. I'm not helping God. I'm just walking the hall and eavesdropping on people who are plotting to murder the king. Maybe I should be ashamed of myself, and maybe I shouldn't even tell anybody because I'm doing this. So sometimes the thing we wish we had isn't as important as the opportunity God gave us. He gave him the opportunity to be awake and to overhear. Seems small. But God used that to save an entire nation. We wouldn't have Jesus if he didn't have insomnia. Amazingly enough. The second point, we can trust the Lord that he's working out the best in our life, even when we can't see it. God was working in Mordecai's life. He was working in the Jewish people, even when they didn't notice it. Sometimes God moves so slow, it's imperceptible. It's like when you look at the clock, you don't notice that the hour hand is even moving. You can notice a second hand. Oh, look at that thing go. You barely notice the minute hand, but you never notice the hour hand even moving because it moves too slow for us. And then suddenly later, hey, an hour later it moved. It jumped from that 8 all the way up to that 9. It moves. But it's so imperceptible. We can trust the Lord that he is working out the best in our life. That's clearly seen in Mordecai. He saved all the Jewish people by this old man who had insomnia. And then, thirdly, God himself promises to repay our good. And again, even when he seems slow in doing it. It was good for you to tell somebody what you overheard. Yeah, well, if it was such a great thing, then how come the king didn't thank me? That's what I'm thinking. And if it was such a great thing, then how come you're letting Haman murder us? If I'm such a wonderful guy and you love me so much, why on December 31st am I going to be exterminated? Well, see, that's because you think you're going to be exterminated on December 31st. You got no idea that God's going to hang Haman on his own gallows the day before. And then all the Jews are going to be given the authority to protect themselves. So when that day comes, nobody anywhere in the kingdom that we have any knowledge of was ever killed. No Jew was killed because of that rule. Sometimes we don't see God doing anything. And that's one of the complaints about Esther. Is people say, I don't see God in it. Well, what, are you blind? How come those dice fell to December 31st when he was looking for a lucky day? How come Naaman or Mordecai just happened to have insomnia the same night people were talking about murdering the king? Why didn't he have it the night before or the night after? He had 5 years. And just so happens he gets it the night people decide to murder the king, he gets insomnia. You don't see God's hand? And then how about the fact that the king chose a Jew for his queen? You don't see his hand? How about the fact that Haman had to lead him around through town saying, this is the man that the king wants to honor? You don't see his hand? And how come as Mordecai is watching Haman build that 70-foot gallows, and he was thinking, I'm going to hang on that tomorrow, I'm going to hang on that tomorrow, I'm going to hang on that tomorrow. And God said, no, you're never going to get near it. I'm building that nice and high because I want everybody to see what happens to people who trespass against me. to get to you. See, that's always the thing. People have to go through God to get to us. And people don't see that. Nothing can happen to me unless God says, okay. So if something happens, God said, okay. And I'm all right with that. I'm not going to argue with him. He's working things out. God himself promised to repay our good. He didn't say the king would, he said he would. Even when God seems a little bit slow to the repay, it seems as God, he's awfully quick to ask for it, but he's awfully slow to repay it. And that's not even true. He just knows he's got to get a lot of things done